There is a garden with no pesticide bottles anywhere in sight. No chemical sprays, no store-bought granules, no sticky traps, no expensive treatments lining the shed wall. And yet every single plant is untouched. No holes chewed through the leaves, no slugs destroying the lettuce overnight, no aphids clustering on the stems, no root damage, no wilting, no infestation of any kind. The neighbor's garden, just 15 feet away, gets destroyed every summer like clockwork. This one never does. And the only thing standing between these plants and complete devastation is something that gets rinsed down the drain in millions of homes every single morning before the sun is even fully up. What you are looking at is not luck. It is not an expensive system. It is not a secret product that someone is selling. It is the thing sitting in your coffee filter right now. The thing you are about to throw away. And once you understand exactly why it works, once you see the science and the history behind it, you will never look at your morning routine the same way again. Used coffee grounds. That is what this is about. Not a coffee-based spray you have to brew separately. Not a complicated recipe with 10 other ingredients. Just the grounds left behind after you make your coffee, applied in a specific way, in specific places, at specific times. And the results are so reliable, so well documented, across so many different climates and garden types, that professional organic farmers in Japan, in Colombia, in parts of East Africa, and in community gardens across Northern Europe have been using this method deliberately and systematically for decades, while the mainstream pesticide industry kept selling you bottles of chemicals you were never supposed to need. Think about what is actually inside spent coffee grounds. Most people assume they are just flavor-depleted waste. They are not. After brewing, coffee grounds retain a dense chemical profile that includes caffeine, chlorogenic acids, diterpenes, and a physical texture that is abrasive at the microscopic level. That combination does something remarkable in a garden environment. It creates a barrier that soft-bodied insects and soil pests find genuinely intolerable. Not mildly unpleasant. Genuinely intolerable. Slugs and snails, which are responsible for a staggering amount of garden destruction worldwide, avoid coffee grounds with a consistency that researchers have documented in controlled studies. The abrasive texture damages their mucus layer, and the caffeine residue disrupts their nervous system at even trace concentrations. Ants, which farm aphids and introduce them deliberately onto your plants to harvest the honeydew they excrete, use chemical scent trails to navigate. Coffee grounds chemically mask and disrupt those trails, breaking the entire system they depend on. And because the grounds also alter the soil chemistry slightly when broken down, certain root-level pests like fungus, gnats, and some species of grubs find the environment actively hostile. Now here is the question that should be bothering you right now. If this works so well, and the evidence is this clear, why is nobody talking about it? Why does every gardening advertisement you have ever seen push you toward a product with a price tag? Why did none of this come up in any conversation about pest control before? The answer is the same answer it always is when something effective and free gets buried. There is no money in it. The global pesticide industry generates over $80 billion every single year. $80 billion. That market depends entirely on your belief that pest control requires a manufactured product, a chemical solution, something you cannot produce yourself from what you already have. The moment that belief breaks down, the market starts to crack. So the product stays front and center in every store, in every advertisement, in every recommendation from every source with a financial stake in what you buy. And the free solution sits in your trash can, completely invisible, because invisibility is exactly where it needs to stay for the system to keep working. You have lived inside this dynamic your whole life without necessarily recognizing it. Think about how many times you have reached for a product to solve a problem that had a simpler solution already sitting in your home. The gap between what works and what gets sold to you is rarely about effectiveness. It is almost always about profitability. And the garden is one of the clearest places in modern life where that gap becomes visible if you know where to look. Here is the simple science of why this works, and it is worth understanding because once you grasp the mechanism, you will be able to apply this logic to far more than just pest control. Caffeine is a natural pesticide. This is not a metaphor. This is what caffeine actually evolved to be inside the coffee plant. It is the plant's own defense system, a chemical weapon developed over millions of years of evolutionary pressure to protect seeds and young leaves from insects and small organisms that would otherwise consume them. When you brew coffee, you extract most of the flavor compounds, but you leave a significant residue of caffeine and associated compounds in the grounds themselves. When those grounds are applied to soil or around plant stems, they reintroduce that defense system into your garden. You are not mimicking nature. You are using nature's own solution, the exact same tool the coffee plant developed to protect itself, and deploying it to protect your plants instead. The abrasive quality is separate from the chemical effect and works completely independently. Slugs and snails move on a layer of mucus that they secrete continuously as they travel. That mucus layer is what allows them to glide over surfaces. Fine, gritty particles like dried coffee grounds damage that layer, make movement painful, and create a physical deterrent that has nothing to do with chemistry at all. Two completely different mechanisms working simultaneously. That is why this method is so consistent across different pest types. It is not relying on a single mode of action the way most chemical pesticides do. It is attacking the problem from multiple directions at once. Now here is exactly how to use this, broken down as simply as possible. The first and most direct application is a physical barrier. You take your dried spent coffee grounds, and drying matters because wet grounds can clump and develop mold. So spread them on a tray and let them air dry for a day or leave them in a low oven for 30 minutes, and you create a ring around the base of each plant you want to protect. The ring should be roughly an inch wide and should not touch the plant stem directly. Refresh it after heavy rain. This is your front line. Slugs, snails, and crawling insects will not cross it willingly. The second application is soil incorporation. Once a month, work a light layer of grounds into the top inch of soil around your plants. Not deeply buried, just lightly mixed into the surface layer. This is what affects the fungus gnats, the grubs, and the soil-level pests. It also mildly acidifies the soil over time, which is beneficial for acid-loving plants like tomatoes, blueberries, roses, and most leafy greens. It is pest control and soil amendment happening simultaneously from a single material. The third application is targeted ant disruption. If you have an ant trail leading to your plants, which almost certainly means you have an aphid problem being actively managed by those ants, you apply a thick line of grounds directly across the trail path. Do this in 2 or 3 places along the trail. The ants cannot read their own chemical signals through the coffee barrier. The trail breaks down. The aphid farming operation loses its management structure. Within days, the aphid population on your plants will begin to drop because the ants are no longer protecting and relocating them. Here is what most people get wrong when they try this for the first time, because these mistakes are common and they will make you think the method does not work when the real problem is the application. The most frequent error is using wet grounds directly from the coffee maker without drying them first. Wet grounds applied in a thick layer will develop gray mold within 48 hours in any warm environment. That mold can damage plant stems and create a new problem while solving nothing. Always dry first. The second mistake is applying the grounds too thickly in a single concentrated mass, rather than in a thin, even layer or a defined barrier ring. A thick mound of grounds can actually repel water from reaching the soil and create a hydrophobic crust. Thin, deliberate application is always more effective than generous, careless dumping. The third mistake is applying once and expecting permanent results. Coffee grounds break down. Rain washes them away. The sun degrades the caffeine residue over time. This is a maintenance system, not a single treatment. Consistency across the season is what produces the dramatic results. One application is a gesture. 12 applications is a garden that does not get destroyed. Now here is where the story gets older and more interesting than most people expect. Coffee's pest-repelling properties have been understood, in practice if not in scientific terminology, for centuries across the cultures where coffee cultivation originated. Farmers in Ethiopia, where the coffee plant is native, and where wild coffee still grows in highland forests, have long understood that the area around coffee plants tends to repel certain insects. The Oromo people, who are credited with being among the first to recognize coffee's properties, used parts of the coffee plant in ways that went far beyond the beverage itself. Coffee's role as a protector was embedded in the agricultural knowledge of those communities, long before any laboratory ever measured caffeine concentration in spent grounds. Across Yemen, where coffee cultivation spread in the 15th century, and where some of the oldest cultivated coffee varieties in the world still exist, coffee residue and byproducts were incorporated into growing practices in ways that modern organic agriculture is only now rediscovering and formalizing, the pattern here is consistent with dozens of other areas of traditional agricultural knowledge. Indigenous and pre industrial farming communities developed highly effective, deeply practical methods through generations of direct observation. Those methods worked with the biology of the environment rather than against it. And then industrial agriculture arrived, drawing a sharp line between the knowledge that could be monetized and the knowledge that could not, and the knowledge without a price tag was quietly allowed to fade out of common practice. That is the uncomfortable truth underneath all of this. We did not become more sophisticated in our approach to growing food. In many ways, we became more dependent, more fragile, and more removed from the underlying intelligence that agriculture actually requires. The farmer who understands why coffee grounds work, who understands what caffeine does to a slug's nervous system, who understands the relationship between soil chemistry and pest populations, that farmer does not need a product, they need knowledge. And knowledge, unlike a bottle of pesticide, does not run out, cannot be priced out of reach, and gets more powerful the more widely it is shared. There is something worth sitting with in that idea. The things that make us genuinely self-sufficient are almost never things that cost money. They are almost always things that require understanding how a plant defends itself, understanding what a pest is actually looking for, understanding what the soil is actually doing beneath the surface. That understanding has been available this entire time, sitting in the overlap between traditional knowledge and basic biology, waiting for anyone willing to look past the label on the shelf and ask a more fundamental question. Not what product should I buy, but what is already here that I have not yet learned to see. Every morning you make coffee, you produce something valuable. The question is just whether you recognize it before you throw it away. If this changed the way you think about what belongs in your trash versus what belongs in your garden, share it with someone who is fighting pests right now and losing. Not because of a lack of resources, because of a lack of this exact conversation.